What's up, niggas?
Yes, believe it or not, I actually find some things to be funny. Just because I make fun of mediocre YouTubers doesn't mean that I'm completely humorless. Monty Python and the Holy Grail. This film might be kind of low for some of you, but I still think it's a great movie. I just like the other 9 in front of it slightly more. I will say this list is composed of movies that I think are pretty close in terms of quality, and The Holy Grail is still a really funny film. I did find myself not laughing 1 or 2 moments when I was supposed to, but the jokes weren't like cringe-worthy or anything. It just wasn't really funny to me. For example, that joke where the past characters of the film were just saying just get on with it or something along those lines. I understand it's a self-aware joke, but it just went on for way too long. And I feel like you have to be more than just self-aware in order to make a self-aware joke funny. But other than that, the film is pretty solid. Actually, a lot more than solid. I still think it says a lot when people still post GIFs, pictures, and sometimes videos of jokes from this film. It really shows how timeless it is. And Holy Grail is one of those movies I could watch multiple times and pretty much not get tired of it. It doesn't necessarily have hitting gags. Like, the movie definitely does, but that's not why you rewatch it. It's because the jokes are just that funny. Kung Fu Hustle. I adore over-the-top humor and over-the-top action. This movie is just filled with it. At first, I didn't know this was a comedy. I thought it was just like, you know, an over-the-top villain group gang, which actually has a really catchy theme song. It's trying to take over the town, very generic plot. And yeah, I would say the rest of the stuff is also pretty generic. The characters, the story. But it doesn't really matter because everything in this movie is really entertaining. Not just from a comedic perspective, but also in terms of action. One of those, I don't give a shit about the laws of physics, I'm just here to have fun type of movies. And it's not a so bad it's good movie. It's actually a well-written film. Funny enough, one of Kung Fu Hustle's greatest advantages towards comedy in their film is the terrible effects. But it works because the film is over the top. There's a scene where, out of nowhere, 2 of the main characters start running like Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner. But this movie isn't just made of over-the-top jokes. Throughout most of the movie, the main character is trying to act evil, even though it goes against his true nature. And he believes one way to push himself over the edge is stealing ice cream. Now, that idea seems really childish and cliched, but it's the execution that makes it funny. During the scene, he has an evil, maniacal laugh, and it seems so forced, but it's supposed to be forced. The character is trying to be evil, and that's just not who he is.
冇咩啊？未見過食嘢唔俾錢啊？追喎！
Vacation. Not the shitty remake, the original movie. This film is so stupid, but that's why I love it. I also do like Christmas Vacation, but I think I prefer this one slightly more. Maybe it's because I have nostalgic glasses on, and I've been watching this movie since I was a kid, and I kind of just started watching Christmas Vacation, but whatever, it's my list. Also, this movie has an R rating, so it has the ability to take more risks. Now, I'm not saying it's better just because it has an R rating. There are a ton of fucking shitty movies out there that have an R rating, and their comedy is reliant on jokes that are incredibly sexual, or haha, he said a bad word. And you could argue Vacation is jam-packed with jokes like that, but it's all about the context. The scene of Chevy Chase asking for directions from some random pimp is just a joke that ends with a bad word, but it's funny because Chevy Chase is trying to find his way out of the ghetto, not really being self-aware of the situation he's in. And even though he's trying to be as polite and nice as possible, he's met with immediate hostility. In a way, Vacation is a lot like Airplane because it's more focused on gags than the actual story, because there's a lot of pointless shit in this film. But most of us give it a pass because a lot of it is really funny. Is there a gag or two that doesn't work? I wouldn't say it wouldn't work, but just not as funny as most of the other gags in the film. I never really cringed at a joke or just said meh. I think the worst gags in this film have still made me laugh. It's just too goofy and nonsensical to send any hate towards. Shaun of the Dead. This film introduced me to British comedy, and I'm very grateful for that. I saw this film when I was 12, and then I wanted to rewatch it so I could fully appreciate it. But funny enough, I appreciate it as much as I did when I was 12. I know that kind of sounds bad, but I mean it as a compliment. The film really holds up. Yeah, jokes like Kill the Queen when he's talking about smashing the jukebox because Queen is playing on there definitely went over my head as a kid. Like, the only thing I got out of watching the movie again was being able to comprehend just a few jokes. I don't know, sometimes I feel like when I go back and watch films I saw as a kid, I start to realize that they weren't as good as I thought they were. But that's the opposite with Shaun of the Dead. It's still really funny. It kind of appeals to a lot of ages in a way, and I think that's why I really liked it as a 12-year-old, and I still like it now as someone who's older. Let me give an example. There's a scene where Nick Frost just simply gets out of his car and says the N-word, and of course, me being 12, I automatically thought that was funny. And I remember watching it for a second time while remembering that scene and thinking, okay, so what they're gonna do is rely on cuss words for comedy. It's not gonna be that funny as I thought it would be. But I still laughed when the scene came on because when I think about it, it's funny how he says that during the most inappropriate time he could say it. His friends are fleeing for their lives and he's trying to pick them up and he just says jokes like that. And you also have to remember the character is super childish and immature. With Nick Frost's character, there's sort of a mix between laughing with him and at him, which is good because his character is perceived as an obnoxious douche. And as a bonus, this movie isn't just a great comedy, but it's also a great horror. The makeup and jump scares are fantastic. The Big Lebowski. Really odd to see Jeff Bridges in a role like this. Before watching this film, I was already aware of the career of Jeff Bridges, somewhat. I mean, it was enough to know that he doesn't really play these type of characters, but the way he did it was just so real and natural. I would have thought that Kurt Russell would have been a better choice, but I mean, Jeff Bridges nailed it. Like most comedies, there isn't really much of a story. It's more about the jokes and I guess the atmosphere for this film. And yeah, The Big Lebowski has a sort of feel that no other movie has. It's one of those feelings that you can't really describe, but you know it's only attributed to one film, like Space Odyssey or Phantom of the Paradise. It just feels like something I've never really seen before and has these different vibes you've never really experienced before. But talking about the comedy, I love it. This film has dry humor, slapstick, great running jokes, my favorite one being John Goodman just constantly bringing up Vietnam, even in situations where it literally has zero relevance. I will say one thing I didn't find funny was the amount of times the characters said the word fuck, and yes, it's one of those self-aware jokes, but again, it's just the characters being self-aware, and that wasn't really enough for me to find it funny, especially when they do it for mostly the entire movie. I'd be lying if I said that didn't annoy me a little bit, but other than that, very good film. A Dog's Will. Just a warning for people who want to watch this movie, the first 10 minutes are pretty dull, and it really sucks to say that because everything else in the film is perfect, but it was a hustle trying to get through the first 10 minutes. It felt like 20. I was just bored out of my goddamn mind, but after the first 10 minutes are done, it starts to get rolling, and it's definitely worth it. A Dog's Will is filled with visual gags, which I believe is a lot harder than just simply producing funny dialogue, and I also believe it has a better comedic payoff. This film isn't just filled with great comedy though, it's also filled with great characters. The main character Cricket is a homeless man, but he's also very clever. He likes to trick and fool people for shits and giggles, but also to get money out of them. You can't help but just to respect how smart the character is. It's kind of like Littlefinger, he's just so smart, he just comes off as charismatic. For those who appreciated the Monty Python films, I feel like you'd really like this one as well. Airplane. Out of all the films I'm talking about on this list, this one has the least amount of story. Airplane is literally just a film with jokes and gags. Yes, there are characters with motives and a plot, but the movie doesn't take it seriously, and that's what makes it great. Airplane throws a ton at you, and 99% of the jokes hit bullseye. There's really no reason for me to talk about the jokes in this film because everyone is pretty much well aware of the type of gags that came from this film, and they haven't seen the jokes while watching the movie, they've probably seen the jokes somewhere online. A lot of people criticize this film because they just see it as the movie just trying its hardest to be inappropriate, and yeah, I could kind of see why they would think that because there's literally just a shot of a woman running to the camera, shaking her tits, and then walking off. I don't know why I think that's funny, it just is to me, but at the same time, a lot of the jokes and gags in this film are pretty clever. Like Holy Grail, this one is pretty timeless, except for those who get easily offended. Hot Fuzz. Well, if you like Shaun the Dead, then you're gonna love this film. It's basically the Shaun the Dead characters put in a different setting. But the reason why it is slightly better is because almost every single joke and gag in this film is relevant towards the story. There are these little jokes at the beginning, they're like kind of funny and stuff, you laugh about it, but it's not like hilarious. And then we get to the end of the film where all these jokes come back, but they're better. And a lot of these gags tie into the plot in some way. I mean, that's just fucking impressive. I really have no issues with this film at all. I'm just nitpicking here, but this movie isn't as heartfelt as Shaun of the Dead, but at the end of the day, I'm judging these films based on comedic value, so who really gives a shit? Black Dynamite. This isn't just one of the most underrated comedies of all time, but also one of the most underrated movies of all time. Every joke was piss myself laughing. There wasn't a joke that was just okay or passable, it was all very fucking funny. If you haven't seen this movie before, I urge you to please watch it. Now, the premise of Black Dynamite is that it's a movie that tries to be bad, to be funny, and that rarely works. The main reason why people love movies that are so bad it's good is because it lacks self-awareness. Sounds horrible to say, but when people try to be good and they fail, it's funny. Like when a writer produces dialogue that's obviously really bad, but they think it's really good, you can't help but laugh. You just think to yourself, how could someone think this is good? And yes, Black Dynamite has self-awareness, but it's clever with the self-awareness. There's a scene where Black Dynamite's going through the sewage pipes, and then when he kicks down the cage lid, and the shape of the lid is a square, but when it pans up to Black Dynamite, he's in a circular pipe. Subtle jokes like that are just brilliant. I feel like if you're smart with the self-awareness, then people will appreciate the cleverness of the joke, and then have a new reason to find it funny. The ending is great too. It just gets over the top silly at this point. There's not really any clever jokes, but I mean, at the same time, we're still delivered really funny comedy. It's a different type of humor, but it's still pretty good. I'm not gonna spoil anything because I feel like a lot of people haven't seen this film, and it's just something you have to watch by yourself to understand why it's funny. Some of you might be curious what I think of the TV show on Adult Swim. It's not bad, but I mean, it kind of misses the point of the film. It's over the top and goofy, but it doesn't try hard to be bad, if you know what I'm saying. And ironically, that's what made the movie so good. Life of Brian. Okay, so Black Dynamite is the funniest film on this list for me, but Life of Brian is something I appreciate more, and it's still really fucking funny. The only reason why I have Life of Brian on here is because this is the only comedy I've seen where they have tackled a serious premise and still made it funny. One of my biggest pet peeves with comedies is that they try to include serious moments within the film. When I go see a comedy, I don't want to see shit like that. I go there to laugh. Dinner for Schmucks is just one of the many examples of why I hate this type of shit. Yeah, there are some funny moments in that movie, but that's not the point. In comedies like Dinner for Schmucks, they have funny moments, and then out of nowhere, with zero transition, they have moments that are just completely serious, and we're supposed to actually have some sort of connection or something. Or we're supposed to learn from this really stupid comedy. Do you honestly believe people are gonna watch this mediocre comedy and be like, wow, that really hit me in the feels? Or look back and connect with its morals? No. But the reason why Life of Brian works is because while the moral is an actual serious issue around the world, the film still treats the material comedically. The moral is about not idolizing people and thinking them as the next messiah. You have to think for yourself and not just follow what other people do. This is a great moral for comedies like Life of Brian because what they can do to produce comedy is point out the ridiculousness of people being so brainwashed. I mean, besides the moral, there are still plenty of gags and jokes to appreciate from this film. It's classic Monty Python humor. There's really not much else to say.